Muchachos y muchachas. Ed Buck, who is he? And what were the atrocities, the sick, depraved, absolutely dark atrocities that he imposed on his victims? And he was a mega donor. To who? Stay right there. We're going to go through it. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented preparedness tools. I keep this baby in my Jeep. This is the Fighter Flare flashlight. This is a professional grade, tactical, ultra bright flashlight. It's entirely solar powered, so I never have to worry about batteries dying when I need it most or plugging it into my wall to get an outlet charge. The Fighter Flare flashlight also comes with a life-saving emergency strobe setting along with 4 other unique life-saving modes, along with the life-saving fire starting ignition lighter on the bottom. The Fighter Flare flashlight can also be seen from over 500 meters away because it comes with 800 lumens. The Fighter Flare flashlight comes with all of this and more. Get the Fighter Flare flashlight by clicking the link in my description below. All right, let's jump right into it because there's a lot of detail that I want to go through. Now, before I go into details, I'm going to preface with a few things. Number one, there is some graphic descriptions of particular things that this man did to his victims. And it's if you're squeamish, just brace yourself. And number two, they do mention names. You see it right there from the bat, wealthy Democratic donor. Upon that descriptor, Democratic, you can already imagine or use your imagination of who exactly we're talking about. Now, with that being said, because of the nature of which I have to commit to create content under community standards here, I will not be railing against the individuals that are named here because I do not want to get flagged for harassment and bullying as the algorithm has been doing very, very vibrantly lately. So anyway, we're going to get straight to it. What I would do is I would encourage you to research on your own the people in which he donated to and go from there. So let's get started. Wealthy Democratic donor Ed Buck, 66. He's found guilty of providing fatal meth doses to 2 men in exchange for sex as part of a twisted party and play fetish and now faces life in prison. Prominent California Democratic donor Ed Buck was convicted Tuesday on charges he injected gay men with methamphetamine in exchange for sex, leading to 2 deaths and other overdoses. Federal jury found 66-year-old Buck guilty of all 9 felony counts against him, which would lead to a life sentence. The verdict came exactly 4 years after one of his victims, 26-year-old Jamal Moore, was found dead of an overdose in Buck's West Hollywood apartment. Today is bittersweet, said Letitia Jackson. That's Jamal Moore's mother. After the verdict, she said that we got victory today. Now, I'm just going to scroll gracefully through these pictures just so you can see with no context behind it. There we go. Here's a picture. Here's a picture. Oh, there's a picture too. And more. All right, let's get through it. The jury deliberated for more than 4 hours after a 2-week trial. A sentencing date has not been scheduled yet. Prosecutors said that Buck paid black men and provided drugs in return for sex acts. Having hunted online for partners with the familiar term PNP, party and play, or using meth and having sex. Now, here is where it turns. Survivors said that Buck had a fetish for injecting his partners with drugs. Buck had pleaded not guilty. His defense lawyer said that neither fatal overdose victim died from meth, that many of the alleged victims were drug addicts. Buck's attorneys, one of whom, Christopher Darden, was a prosecutor in the O.J. Simpson case, did not comment. So here is a bit more of detail. And now there is more that's a bit more descriptive that I am going to also bring forth to you. Let's start off with this. Buck's 2019 arrest marked a turning point for activists who protested outside his apartment and pressured law enforcement to act after Moore died on Buck's floor in 2017. Even after Timothy Dean, 55, died 18 months later, it took another 9 months and a near death of another overdose victim before Buck was arrested in September of 2019. In total, if I'm reading this correctly, it could have been it was 3 victims, 2 of which were fatalities, 1 of which seemingly survived the incident. Dean was well known as a porn star, while Jamal Moore was working as an escort. He would find desolate, vulnerable victims and push meth on them over and over until they went unconscious, said Assistant U.S. Attorney Lindsay Bailey during her closing arguments on Friday. That's what he liked about it. The power gave him sexual gratification. Every time he stuck a needle in someone's arm, he was playing God. And he never stopped, not even after 2 men died. Now, here is a prelude to some information that I will also go through. Buck is a wealthy white man who is active in gay causes, animal rights. His Facebook page showed him with Hillary Clinton and former Governor Jerry Brown and Representatives Ted Lieu and Adam Schiff. Yet, friends of Buck said that he liked to project influence, yet was not a major political force.
You got a backup cam in this thing? Back. Get back. Do me a favor.
Yep, I know.
Stay back, man.
Yeah, I'm staying back.
No, I need you to stay back. I need you to stay back more. Okay. All right? I understand that we need some confidentiality.
Come on back.
Turner. Hey. There, go. You get.
What I see behind me, what we all see behind us, is a really exciting scene. Ed Buck has finally been arrested, almost a little bit more than 2 years after Jamel Moore was killed in this very apartment. I just got off the phone with Ms. Nixon, Jamel's mother, and she is elated. I also spoke with the siblings of Timothy Dean, and they too are extremely grateful and relieved that Mr. Buck is finally off the streets or out of his drug home, which is what the LASD is referring to it as. It's unfortunate that it's taken a third overdose for the LA Sheriff's Department to finally act. We believe that that third overdose could have been avoided. We believe that the death of Timothy Dean could have also been avoided had they taken the death of Jamel Moore seriously. But they finally did something, and we're extremely relieved and grateful for that.
So then brings us to this. I'm going to go into some specific details. Now, these were the initial details of the first 2 men, young men who died in Buck's presence. An hour before sunset, on July 27, 2017, a Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies responded to a 911 call for North Laurel Avenue in West Hollywood. The deputies walked through the back metal entry gate and into an open courtyard of a 2-story apartment building where an older white man in an undershirt was standing on the concrete stairs, beckoning urgently. They followed him into his living room, gray walls, and a TV showing porn. A young black man was lying unresponsive on a mattress on the floor, naked except for white socks. 3 minutes later, the paramedics from Los Angeles County Fire Engine 8 raced up the stairs carrying the red plastic toolboxes, but the young man was already dead. The man, his name is Edward Buck, Ed Buck for short. He was 62 years old. He described the dead man as his friend. 2 hours earlier, Buck said that his friend injected meth. A little after that, his friend became very warm to the touch. Buck had placed bags of ice on his friend's skin. He went 2 doors down. His neighbor was in the medical field to try to get advice. So then when he couldn't help, he called 911. So once the deputies got there, they found Ed Buck, kind of leaning on his neighbor's shoulder in distress or exhaustion. It was almost dark when another man walked through the gate into the courtyard. So this is the same scene. Another man walked into the courtyard. He was young, slim, and black. He wore a cap and carried a white bag. The deputies exchanged glances for years now. Tenants at 1234 North Laurel had been calling the county sheriff to complain that young men, many of whom looked disheveled and possibly homeless, were ringing their buzzers at all hours on their way to see Buck. Once a tenant called to say that a man who had just left Buck's place was masturbating on the sidewalk, yelling about syringes. So if Buck was expecting a second visitor tonight, it was not out of character. One deputy peered over the railing. Stores closed, he said. The man loped out through the gate. An investigator arrived to the county medical examiner's office. On the floor next to the young man, he noted Ziploc bags swelled with water. A rolling tool cabinet was parked against the wall. Inside were several syringes with brown residue, a scale, lighters, a straw, a glass pipe with burn marks, and a clear plastic bag containing a crystal-like blue substance. The top and bottom drawers contained sex toys. The investigator and his assistant wrapped the body with a white sheath. The one grabbed the sheath under the head and another near the feet, and they carried it down the stairs before placing it on a stretcher on the courtyard. When they went back up to collect the evidence, including the dead man's backpack, it shows that they did a autopsy, or they took samples, sent it to the toxicology department. They ruled the death an accidental methamphetamine overdose. So this was the first incident. The article then goes into detail about Los Angeles and meth overdoses not being out of the ordinary, that this actually occurs very often. In fact, the numbers have skyrocketed into more drug use, and that this is happening more often than late. And then there was a second case where there was a second man who died 18 months later. Responding to a 911 call from Buck's apartment, paramedics around 55-year-old black man, they found a 55-year-old black man lying unresponsive on a mattress floor, naked except for white briefs in his mouth, obscured by a dark purge of blood. Buck again told sheriff's deputies that the dead man was his friend. Toxicology showed an overdose of meth mixed with alcohol, and the coroner ruled it an accident. That week, reporters dug up material on Dean. While not a male prostitute, the tabloids labeled Jamal Moore, Dean was identified as a porn actor. Dean was actually known as a gay porn industry as a dominant top named Hole Hunter. So then it goes into, some speculation. Okay, there's one death, there's two deaths, there's nothing going on. There's nothing being held accountable against Ed Buck. So that's when the mainstream media actually started to dig on him, and they found out that he was a mega donor. One death is a tragedy. Two deaths are a pattern. As a strange event, North Laurel Avenue captured the attention of the national media, and they found out that he was a mega Democratic Party mega donor and political activist. That was said by ABC News, a prominent political activist by NBC, and he was high profile, according to the New York Post, and he was high powered, according to Fox. Frustrated by the lack of response from law enforcement, the family of Jamal Moore filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Buck. The county and the district attorney, their lawyers, tallied several $100,000 in political contributions that Buck had made to the Democratic Party, candidates of all levels, from city to federal. They said that the Buck was being shielded thanks to his political donations and status. They said that the county does not investigate crimes against black gay men. So then here is another incident. I'm sorry. Before that, it goes into they were hopeful that because there was a black district attorney of Los Angeles and she was Democratic, that hopefully she would perform a thorough investigation into the matter. And unfortunately, it did not carry through. And that's where protesters started to make themselves known and vocal. And then there was another incident on September 11th, 2019 at 5:20 in the morning. A man walked into a cashier's booth at a Shell station on Santa Monica and North Laurel, 3 blocks from Buck's apartment. The man was black, and wore jeans and a button-up shirt. His hand kept rising to touch his chest. "I think I'm having a heart attack," he said. The cashier called 911. The man sat down on the 12-inch high retaining wall while he waited. The fluorescent lights revealing the face contorted with pain. A fire truck and an ambulance pulled into the parking lot. The man had been staying at Buck's apartment for weeks, coming and going with his own key. He needed somewhere to stay, so they had an arrangement. He did the laundry and grocery shopping. He held the gate open politely for the other tenants, but there was another side to his relationship with Buck. What caused him to overdose? He told sheriff deputies that Buck slamming injecting him with a too high dose of methamphetamine. Then, he said, Buck refused to call for help. So this is where it gets really kooky. 5 days later, Jamal Moore died. The publisher of the online paper WeHo Daily received an email from a woman named Letitia Nixon, who is Jamal's mother, and she claimed to have a lot of content that could be very useful in painting the characteristics of this Ed Buck guy and her, knowing her son's relationship, or her son himself, and then the relationship he got into. Let's actually jump to those details right now and see how sick this man actually was. Sex, Politics, Meth, and Death in West Hollywood. And this is coming from WeHo Times. This was written back in 2017. Here are the details as put by Letitia Nixon, Jamal Moore's mother. She learned that her son, who was unemployed, had recently been doing sex work. She told WeHo Times that her son's friend was also engaged in similar activity and that they had a client in common. She says, when he calmed down, he told me that Ed Buck was one of my son's clients and that Ed Buck was one of his clients as well, Nixon said. Buck would have my son go out Santa Monica Boulevard looking for young, gay, black guys so he could inject them with drugs, see their reaction and how they would react and take pictures with them. Nixon says that a detective from West Hollywood station of the Los Angeles County's Sheriff's Department, who called her following her son's death, said no drugs or paraphernalia were found at Buck's home. Nevertheless, Nixon is steadfast in her accusations about the activist's alleged fetish for getting young African-American men high. He would supply heroin, meth, and other drugs to get them to smoke or use with a needle, Nixon alleges. Buck would pleasure himself at the sight of my son using drugs. So this was Ed Buck's sexual fetish. He would like to see them actually using the drugs. She asserted that Jamal Moore's friend told her the bigger the cloud of smoke, the bigger reward from Buck, who would excitingly encourage Jamal to increase his dosage by saying, more, I'll give you $500 more. So what I would imagine happen is that, maybe that Ed Buck knew what the after effects of, doing so much dosages of what he gave them, what effects they would have on his victims, and dark and deranged enough, that is what gave Ed Buck sexual gratification. One of Moore's friends with whom WeHo Times spoke described his relationship with the deceased man as one between true lifelong friends, not friends like you get in the gay world. The man who gave WeHo Times his full name, but says because of his vocation as a sex worker, asked to be identified otherwise. Says he also used drugs supplied by Ed Buck in the latter man's apartment. After accurately describing the interior of the apartment with which this reporter is personally familiar, Cameron told WeHo Times Buck asked him if he ever slammed, a street term for intravenous meth use. So slammed meaning that he shot up. I told him no and that would take more money, Cameron said, describing Buck's reaction as excited. Cameron said Buck seemed to get off on getting you higher and higher. The trouble that led to Jamal's death last week may have had its genesis a year ago when Letitia Jackson heard from Jamal by phone. He was in a panic. She said, and this is Jamal's mother now, "My son filed a police report," Nixon told WeHo Times. He filed a police report because he said that Buck had held him in his apartment or whatever and had shot him up with a needle or something he didn't know what it was. He called me crying, 3 minutes on the phone, hollering. I'm like, what the hell is going on? He said, this man shot me up with something I don't even know what it is. And I'm like, my son is having a breakdown or episode. But he sent me pictures of his arm. His arm was red. Continued, Jamal got scared at the urging of relatives and a few close friends who knew of those outrageous encounters. My son came home to me in Texas to get away. Nixon continued, yes, my son was an adult and didn't live a fairy tale perfect life, but he didn't deserve to die this way. Ed Buck cuts a formidable swath through West Hollywood, LA County, and National Democratic Party politics. And it goes into some of his journey in 1987, Arizona politics as a registered Republican, leading the charge to recall the governor, Evan Mecham. Ed Buck's move to West Hollywood into the Democratic Party saw him closely supporting several congressional members, state and local officials with generous donations and political advice. Buck gave $2,700 to Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2015 and another $250 in 2016. He was also influential in the most recent city council races, to which he gave thousands of dollars to support the incumbents, making him one of California's most prolific and substantial political donors. So in specific, this is how much money and why they call him a prolific Democratic donor in California. In the 2013 and 2015 election cycles, he flung $238,000 in total at the Democratic candidates, a little each to a lot of people, when before he'd gone as high as $43,000 and often much lower. His contributions from 2005 to 2017 totaled $433,500 to the Democratic Party. He went out in public with bandages on his arms. He snapped at you for nothing. So I just found that this story was really interesting given the timing and as far as who he donated to. Like I said, I'm not going to name that in this video. I'm going to have you do that homework on your own. But yeah, go look at his Democratic donors, go look at his pictures. I think you'll find this pretty interesting. So anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. This is just very bizarre, and it's always interesting that these people are, they're associated with the darkest things. Guys, thank you so much for your support. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and tell somebody about this channel. Share this channel to groups if you're a part of them as well. Thank you for your love for this channel. And if you'd like to see me keep going and you like what I do, please consider giving a contribution to natlydenise.com/donate, in which keeps the lights on and the food on the table. So anything is appreciated. You guys rock. Thank you so much for your love. I will catch you in the next video.